Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope everyone's having as good of a day, if not better, than either one of us. Not saying that for a bad reason, just trying to be positive. But welcome to another episode of the Marvel Annotated podcast. Now, today we have a few interesting topics. We have the Miles Morales Spider-Man game, or Spider-Man Miles Morales, which came out on PlayStation devices, PlayStation 4 and 5. And then we also have WandaVision news, which is always a good thing since that was radio silent for a while, and then they had the I think Entertainment Weekly cover. I think it was that publisher, and they finally revealed the release date and some stills and did some interviews. Now after that, off the news of Star-Lord joining the not as Guardians of the Galaxy, but joining Thor: Love and Thunder. We'll talk a little bit about some story ideas, what we think we might see in the movie, with that extra piece of the puzzle added, and we'll cap it off with some talk about the unfortunate, just recent reportings of the Marvel's Avengers video game. It's really disappointing. Just I feel bad for Square Enix in a lot of ways, and also for future games of this caliber, based on just the negative news surrounding the release. But I'm not alone today. I am joined by a special guest who, if you guys have been following, I know it's been a while since we've been posting here at HN. I've been battling some sickness here and there, but I feel good. But Jackson, you're joining us today, so I'll let you introduce yourself to the audience and kind of plug in anything you want to plug in real quick.
Yeah, thank you for having me again, Josh. I'm Jackson Hayes. I'm editor-in-chief of FullCircleCinema.com, and I'm a features editor over at CBR. So, yeah, me and Josh, we run in a lot of the same circles, know a lot of the same
Yep.
people, and like a lot of the same news. So, that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, just a little off topic, and we'll moderate ourselves this time. But literally before recording this, we talked for like a half hour about football and stuff. So like
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting, just how a lot of overlapping interests
Yeah, a
there.
lot, a
But I
lot of
think it makes
overlapping.
for good. I think it makes for good discussion. And getting on to our next segment here, Jackson, I'll let you kind of take it away. Thor: Love and Thunder. So Chris
Yeah,
Pratt's joining the cast
yeah,
as
big
Star-Lord.
news. This had been teased before. I mean, Vin Diesel had confirmed that the Guardians are going to be playing some role. We didn't know that there were like rumors and speculation that it might just be Rocket and Groot, and they may have like a little part in the movie. But now we get confirmation that Chris Pratt is in fact in the movie. So, my bet, if I had to put a lot of money down, he just finished filming Jurassic World. I don't think he's going to be joining another massive shoot. I think this is going to be a smaller cameo, a small thing. I mean, to set up the continuity with Avengers Endgame. Um, I think it would be great if it was part of a cold open or maybe a moment after the cold open where there's some funny banter between the Guardians and Thor and they just kind of drop him off. They have an argument or whatever. It's not working out. They're not the easiest people to get along with. Thor's not the easiest person to get along with.
Nope.
They just kind of part ways. They just kind of have an argument and part ways, and some great hilarity. Taika Waititi funny writing comes in, and we got a great moment to think about. I don't think Chris Pratt's going to play into the third act of this movie or have any huge part in Thor and Jane Foster's story. But I'm glad that we're getting this continuity. I'm glad they're just not going to throw it away. Back in phase 1, phase 2, things like that slip under the rug here and there. But I'm glad they're not letting that happen here, and we're going to get Chris Pratt and at least some of the Guardians. I would expect Rocket and Groot to be part of it. Not sure Karen Gillan or if she or Mantis, if Palm Clementif will be any part of it, but we're getting the funny guys, and they'll be there, and they'll have some laughs for a few minutes.
Yeah. So actually, I was going to ask you this: with the inclusion of Star-Lord, at least being in it, I can easily see a funny thing being like Star-Lord trying to find human family members of his, maybe that are on Earth. Um, since at this point he doesn't really have any blood relatives that he knows of left, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. So I can see that kind of being a funny storyline with the character.
Oh yeah.
But do you think this is going to, like, how do you think this could then connect to said villain, right? Because I don't think the Guardians as a whole are going to play a big part into, um, I guess, the story, right? Like I think it's
Right.
gonna they're gonna try keeping the main leads as Odinson Thor and Jane Foster Thor. And I think they're going to probably try doing that. But I mean, so if Star-Lord does play some sort of role, whether smaller or large, I guess I'm not really doing a good job of
No, but
introducing
I
this,
know what
but
you mean. Like,
yeah.
if he plays even a more minor role in the film as like as a side character, I mean, you're asking for. I mean, the connections to the outer space, the galaxy of the MCU is vast, and I
Mhm.
mean, he knows a lot of people. He knows a lot of things. He's seen a lot of things. He knows that he's done a lot of stuff. So it's one of those. He's one of those characters that could have endless information in terms of, we're dealing with someone that has worked with the Ravagers, who have been to every corner and seen all the scum and villainy in the universe. And I'm sure if there's someone, and if the villain comes from space or some, a celestial type being or someone with larger
Yeah.
power, I mean, he's the guy you're going to want to talk to, right? I mean, he's very well versed in that area. I mean, Thor has kept to the nine realms, sure, but like he doesn't know everything, and
Hmm.
he could stand for to take some advice sometimes, especially from someone who knows a thing or two.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about this before recording, but I think obviously Magog is a good fit, right, for the story of Jane Foster Thor, just because in the Mighty Thor comics, which I think they said, by the way, like she will be called the Mighty Thor, but in the comics, her whole story ended off with, Magog came back and they had to fight her, or not her, they had to fight it. And the way they defeated Magog was by, I think, like tying Mjolnir to Magog and throwing it into the sun, basically. And like the whole thing with Magog, if I remember correctly, is like a billion souls at one point that were on a planet that Odin played a part of destroying. And through some dark magic, those billions of souls became this Hulk-like creature called Magog. That sole purpose is basically to want to kill Asgard, but more specifically Odin and his bloodline, which leads into Thor. So I mean that in itself would continue kind of a theme from Thor Ragnarok in terms of like the sins of the past Asgard that were kind of covered up, so to speak, through Odin and I guess Hela's conquering. But Gorr the God Butcher is another character that's been rumored quite a bit, and I think we talked about this. If they eventually want to do Venom in the MCU, and let's say not connect it right to the Tom Hardy Venom, this would be a really sleek, everything is connected kind of way to do it because the all black necro sword used by Gorr is actually the first symbiote created by the symbiote god Null, which for casual fans is super confusing. I'm sure because you're just like, wait, what? There's a symbiote god and this and that, but it further leads in the Guardians in a way because that symbiote god Null is the god that killed a celestial, and that head of the celestial became nowhere. So it kind of, it's everything's connected in a way, but I thought that'd be kind of very left field way to go about it. But I think it makes sense too, because you can tie in Gore's motivation about, no gods coming to help, all this stuff with Thanos and his actions for sure. So I definitely think it could work. Plus, you need a villain, right? That's gonna be powerful enough to warrant
Right, right. And they've used a
two
lot of them.
Thors.
There's a lot of them. They've used a
Yeah.
ton. You're gonna have to dig deep for some deep cuts. Null is somebody that, I mean, with everything going on with Sony's universe, he's one of those characters that everyone is anticipating is going to play a bigger role in Sony's universe. And whether that's the case or not, you have to be a fool to believe that at some point down the line, the symbiote, whether it is Tom Hardy's Venom or not, will play some kind of role with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. It's too important a story to the character to ignore completely, even but just because Sony's doing their own movies. So Null is this powerful. He's a more recent character, but he's very high praised, and people very much enjoy the idea of this creator of symbiotes, this ancient monster, and it's a character that's powerful. It's a character that is terrifying. It's a character that you can use in a lot of different ways, and I
Has
think
history with
that
Thor
has
in the
has a
comics
lot of a
too.
lot of history with Thor and the Asgardians, and I think there's connections to be had there. I mean, if you want to continue Thor's story, whether it's with Jane Foster or continuing having Thor appear in movies, that's a direction to go. It's a very important direction you could go, and a very smart one for especially for people who are more new to the comics, and it would also keep things fresh. It's vastly different than what we've seen. It's not a dark elf situation. It's not a Malekith. It's not Loki or the Frost Giants again. It's something very different from what we've seen, and I think it's an option they should definitely explore.
Yeah, and I think so. Let's say, right, Marvel, Sony, they're not able to. You would think they'd have to make an agreement about this kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's say they can't come to the table about this, and this perhaps because Sony's probably going to be like, well, if you're going to do that, you might as well just bring in Tom Hardy into the MCU, and then Kevin Feige, I can see being like, power of Christ compels you. Like, no, keep that in its own pocket universe. They could always do something too, where we never saw Hela killed, and you could do something where you read the Thor God of Thunder storyline, right, by Jason Aaron that introduced Gorr?
I didn't read it, but I'm well aware of what happens.
Okay, so it's actually one of the it's one of the best things, I believe, is Marvel Now when they did that relaunch. One of the best things that came out of that relaunch, 1,000 hands down, to be totally honest with you. But the story of Gorr starts off with Gorr finding two ancient beings in knight kind of armor with swords and all of that, dead on his planet, right? And this is after Gorr has already lost faith in the gods that his planet worshipped. And basically, he lost his family. He prayed. Nothing was answered, none of his prayers. So he's a faithless man at this point with a lot of anger. He finds these two dead gods. One of them has a sword. That sword ends up being the all black Necro sword. We find out later when they finally decide to develop the character of Null, the god symbiote or the symbiote god. We find out that ancient being that had the sword that Gorr found was actually a heavily weakened and wounded Null that was basically in like a comatose state. So that's why he didn't react to stop Gorr from taking the all black Necro sword. Um, in a way, they could adapt that storyline by having Hela found on a different planet by, I guess, whatever race of beings Gorr is going to be in the MCU, and presumably played by Christian Bale, right? And you can have it where maybe there's a way that just like how, and this would fit with the whole Mighty Thor thing, right? So just like how Jane Foster can pick up Mjolnir and become Thor, you can do a mirror of that by having Gorr's storyline be basically Hela with one of the swords that she's able to create or whatever, right? Having Gorr's character pick up that sword and more or less gain the powers with some deviations of Hela. Since Hela's character in the MCU was basically an amalgamation of Hela from the comics and Gorr, the God Butcher. So I think that's a really interesting way you can make a story with Gorr in this movie that mirrors Jane Foster's story, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I think that that's a direction that is really appealing in a lot of ways.
Because
Like I
it would
mentioned
mirror
earlier.
each other, so
Yeah,
it
and
works
in a lot
out.
of ways, it's different than what we've seen. I mean, you get that
Yeah.
mythology and that deep stuff without it being, overly boring or overly, just too, like, the first two Thor movies go a little too hard, trying to be, Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, stuff
Yeah,
like that.
especially the Dark
When,
World.
yeah, it needs to take it needs to take itself seriously, but also it needs that Taika Waititi kind of humor, and it needs to take some moments need to be lighter than others. And I think that this character is one that necessarily wouldn't be a funny character. Like Hela was witty. She wasn't funny, but she had some wit to her.
Yeah.
This guy is someone that you bounce jokes off of, but not necessarily. He's not. He may be the butt of the joke, but he's not in on the joke. He's
Yeah.
not here to laugh and have a funny time. He's here to do damage. And Thor's become a more lighthearted character recently. Well,
That can work with Christian Bale
it
too.
absolutely could work. Bale's a great actor. He can do that dry acting, that dry humor.
He's got the
Where
voice for it too.
yeah, and he doesn't realize that he's part of the joke, but he's very serious and in put in his way, and I mean he portrayed that beautifully.
It's like Drax a little bit,
Absolutely, it's
but
very
a
much
lot
like
more
this.
sinister, obviously.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I think honestly, like, well, honestly, to be honest, I really do expect Star-Lord's role in this movie to be more like they're tired of Thor basically, and they kind of bring him back to Earth and
Yeah,
kick him out or
that's
something,
exactly what I think it's going to be. Yeah.
or whatever it's going to be. The most important thing that they haven't really talked about yet, that I would love to hear them talk about, to be honest, is how they're going to reintroduce Mjolnir, because they can obviously do the thing, right, where it's like, technically pieces of Mjolnir are left on Earth after Hela destroyed it. So maybe someone collected the pieces and reassembled somehow Mjolnir, and Jane Foster's just the only person able to lift it for whatever reasons. Um, that could work out, and then you could easily do the storyline of the reason why Jane Foster's tenure as Thor is maybe limited is because, in the same way Mjolnir was repaired, um, that probably wasn't, a permanent fix, so to speak. So with wear and tear, maybe Mjolnir comes apart again and can't be reassembled in the same way, for whatever reason. But I really like that story in terms of some of the best hero villain dynamics are villains that mirror the hero. So it's like in the same way where Jane Foster is thrust with power by becoming the new mighty Thor. Um, Gorr, the God Butcher, is thrust with new power by becoming the God Butcher. And you could definitely do a really interesting take on how, like, two people given great power. Obviously, one, great power, great responsibility, Jane Foster. Other one, great power, great vengeance. I guess I don't really know how you would um, tagline that, but I definitely think it works out really well. Um, Also, they got to explain what's going on with Thor too, I guess. And is he still going to use Stormbreaker or not? Because Stormbreaker is pretty powerful, but um, that'd be really sad actually if he lost Stormbreaker in the movie, and he goes back to get Mjolnir because he loses Stormbreaker, and then he can't lift it. That would be kind of funny to me, to be
It would.
honest.
You could mirror that scene from the first movie where he's unable to lift it in the same way when he realizes his father's put the cursor, whatever the right word is, on it, where he can't lift it, whether he unless he acts, as he intends to. So you could definitely mirror that scene.
What if, this is definitely me throwing a lob out here, right? Not even a lob. This is me across the map, no scoping, hoping I hit. Um, what if Thor does the lose Stormbreaker, right, in the beginning of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and then instead of Gorr finding, like, Hela or something like that and using one of Hela's powers or whatever, what if Gorr takes somehow is able to wield Stormbreaker?
Oh yeah, that'd be another kick in the pants to Thor if he hasn't had one already.
Yeah,
Has
because
enough
then
already. Yeah.
because definitely Stormbreaker, as we saw in Infinity War, if it could take on an Infinity Gauntlet and Thanos with it, it's powerful enough, you would imagine, to. I mean, like, think about it like this, right? You saw how ineffective Iron Man's armor in Infinity War was to just cut Thanos and get a drop of blood. Contrast that to when Thor easily cut off Thanos' head. So I think that shows just how powerful, and just from, like, not even energy projection related
Right.
abilities,
It was on the brink of
that
killing
is.
Thor. If Cap hadn't have intervened when
Yeah,
Thanos grabbed it, it would have killed Thor. So
yeah,
it's a very, very powerful weapon.
yeah. And if the whole thing, right, is focusing one's power, I mean, you can easily do a thing where maybe Gorr naturally has an affinity to something else or dark magic. I don't know. You can do something, but I think that would be I kind of hope that is actually what they do. I hope Thor is screwing around with the Guardians, loses Stormbreaker. Stormbreaker ends up on another planet, whatever, right? Ends up in Gorr's hands. Gorr is able to wield it, becomes the God Butcher with this almighty powerful weapon. Juxtapose that with Jane Foster becoming the mighty Thor. Thor butthurt, unworthy the entire time. That'd be kind of interesting.
All right. It'd be fascinating seeing him caught in the middle between these two impending, these things that are going to come together, and whether he knows it or not. One of them is someone who's very close to him at one point. Another one is looking to come at him and take him out. So it would be a very interesting place for him to be in, one that he hasn't really seen before. He's always at the forefront trying to finish it all, be the guy who takes everything on. So
Yeah, and I think it works to, like, to wrap up my thoughts on this. I think it works also well with the story, because a big part of the ending of not necessarily Ragnarok, right? But like what Thor was doing in Endgame was he was basically dodging his responsibilities, not being responsible, and kind of just wanting to do whatever for the most part with the Guardians. And then this would directly make Thor and his character in this movie have to confront his responsibilities and his actions. Um, in terms of the fact that actions have consequences, and both of his actions would be coming to a head in this movie if he inadvertently ends up being responsible for the God Butcher by Stormbreaker being the weapon that Gorr uses, and at the same time, the mighty Thor, Jane Foster, and I'm sure he would feel responsible for the fact that every time Jane becomes Thor, her cancer gets worse. Um, so if Thor had his stuff together, this would have never had to happen in the first place. And then by the end of the movie, Jane would likely not die, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Damn, did we just bust out the whole plot of the movie by deduction? That's
If we
kind of
did, there are going
it's
to
a
be
good story.
some Marvel people knocking on our door, based purely on the speculation. It's purely
Yeah,
speculation, Marvel. Don't worry
purely
about it.
speculation. I have not seen a script for anything whatsoever. Just kind of connecting dots, so to speak. But yeah, do you have any last thoughts on the whole? I mean, we kind of took it away from the whole Chris Pratt stuff, I guess, naturally. But you have any final thoughts on it, so to speak?
I think you hit almost all the bases. I think there's some fascinating angles for them to go in. I think there's a lot we still don't know about this movie, and I'm excited for where it's going to go, and I'm excited for what direction they take this villain because Christian Bale is
Mhm.
such a great actor, and I mean he can do
Yeah.
almost anything that we laid out for right here. So I can't wait for to see what it really comes in, and who knows, it could be something we haven't even thought of or something that we never even considered. So
Hmm.
I'm glad that they're that this movie's coming out. I'm glad they're doing another Thor. It's a character that needed more story told, and then Jane Foster's going to Natalie Portman's back, and there's just
Hmm.
a lot of positives here.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna turn like three of those ideas I just spit out into features, honestly. Flesh them out more, write it out.
I
But
appreciate you having me. I hope
mm,
next time we get to talk a little more in depth about Miles after I finish it, and
yeah, that'd be
yeah, and
great. Yeah.
yeah, and hopefully we get some more MCU news, and eventually, we'll have WandaVision to talk about. So there's things on the horizon. And everyone, like we mentioned earlier, just stay patient. Maybe
Yes.
not in the case of Avengers, that's your own opinion, but everything else, stay patient, and that good things will come.
Yeah. And yeah, go check out Jackson. Social media links will be in the description. And for everyone listening, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.